really we try to just remember that these residents, we are working in their homes. And so that's, I think, a really big piece of it. So especially during times like COVID, but even in other times, we have a lot of nonprofits that we work with. So if somebody had lost a job or had a...
Welcome to Multifamily Rockstars. If you are new to apartment investing or already experienced, you will enjoy this show. You will hear from the leading experts in multifamily real estate so that you can be a better owner, operator, and investor. Real people, real stories, life-changing. And now, your host, Ryan Christopher Nunes.
Welcome to Multifamily Rockstars. Today's guest is Kim Radaker. Kim is the founder of Exponential Property Group in Dallas, Texas. Kim manages 4,800 multifamily units, or $450 million worth of multifamily assets. Kim has grown her business from 2 employees to over 180 in less than a decade. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Thanks for making the time. Let's jump right in. So Kim, walk the listeners through your background and the evolution of your company.
Sure. So I graduated from University of Iowa with a finance major. So I've always loved anything that was kind of applied math type pieces. I've got economics and accounting minors too. And so kind of all of that math-based business stuff was always my favorite pieces. So started my career in the retirement plan industry. And then when my kids were born, went to work just on their education committee for the professional organization in that field. And so at that point also started investing in real estate and started with some single family houses and bought 7 of them over the course of the first year doing that, then held onto those for a little while and then started in multifamily in 2011. So we had 1 property with 77 units and, like you said, 2 employees, and it's just kind of all grown from there. Sold that one in 1031 into a bigger one, then bought another bigger one, and just kind of kept going from there, and doubled in size in 2018 when we purchased a 2,000 unit portfolio. Wow. So it's been a wild ride, but a lot of fun along the way.
Oh, that's incredible. That's a great story. So walk us through that first deal that you did. That's pretty interesting. So 77 units, is that what you mentioned?
77 units.
Okay.
How
did you find it?
Probably a
and
little
kind
fuzzy
of...
by now, but we actually were touring a property with a broker and kind of asked, hey, do you have anything else that we should be looking at? And she's like, well, actually, I've got this one thing. It's been under contract, but I think it's about to fall out because it's kind of a short sale situation. And so we went and drove through it and ran the numbers on it, and it looked fantastic. And so that ended up being our first property, which was Spanish Chase in Irving.
Okay.
It's traded twice since then, when we sold it, and then it's traded again from the people that we sold it to. But it was a great project. It was we learned a heck of a lot on that project. Learned that if you ever have a resident that isn't going to stick very well, if you have any carpet in there, they will manage to spill red Kool-Aid in every room that you have carpet in, which is a big reason why we use vinyl plank throughout all of our renovations. So
wow.
That was definitely one of the learning curves.
And then how did you have the courage to, go make that transition from single family to jump into multifamily like you did?
I don't know. Just it sort of seemed like it was time. There wasn't as much single family stuff that we wanted to do right at that point in time. It was a good way to scale the business up and kind of take things to the next level. And so we put it together and moved on from there and kind of figured out whatever we didn't know and learned along the way. And it's been a great process. So, I mean, it's a little scary. There was definitely scary parts buying that first deal. We actually ended up having to have $50,000 of hard earnest money actually leave title and be passed through to the seller to stop a foreclosure on the property. So that was probably the most nerve-wracking piece, because at that time, losing that $50,000 would have been quite painful. So that was the scariest part. But the numbers just really worked, and we were excited about it, and we knew it wasn't going to happen unless we did, and so moved forward.
Did you self-manage that from day one?
Yes. So we've always self-managed and been very hands-on with our properties. At that particular property, I was actually down there working out of one of the units most of the time, kind of converted it over to an office, and spent most of my time sitting on a couch in one of the units working on all the various numbers and stuff. Had a manager obviously downstairs that was handling the direct interaction with all of the residents, but did we were hands-on in terms of paying all the bills and keeping all the records, doing everything we could on that front.
Wow, that's amazing, amazing story. So, obviously it's been uncertain times for everyone and going through this pandemic. So, what are you doing with your company now and what's the vision that you're birthing over the next 3 years?
Really, we're kind of taking one day at a time in many ways. We're definitely still open to growth and purchasing properties if we really find the right thing, but we're being very, very cautious in terms of what that right thing might look like and what we want to do with it. And obviously, this is a time when it's really time to shine for hands-on management. It's made a huge difference. We've, before the month of March was even over, we had phone calls with every single resident in our portfolio that we could get a hold of to find out how they were, what was going on, did they have job losses, what could we do? So we were very, very proactive in reaching out to them, making sure that any ones that were having difficulty, that we got them help from various nonprofits, made sure that all of the kids at the property that might have been on a free or reduced lunch program were getting fed. So we partnered with some of the nonprofits for that as well. So really kind of making sure that the residents were okay during this time. And I think that's made a really huge difference in terms of the success that we've seen.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. And so let's dive a little bit into your vertically integrated strategy. So walk us through the different business lines that you have in your company, how those all fit together, and what's internally focused and what also may be externally focused for other clients.
Sure. So obviously we have the properties, and so that's a big piece of it. We have the property management company that manages all of our properties. We don't currently manage for anyone else.
Okay.
It's a conversation that comes up once in a while as to whether or not we would do that. But at this point, we've decided to just keep our focus on the properties that we do own. Then I guess kind of the next piece that came along was our materials import company. And really the way that came along is on our second property. It was 50% occupied when we bought it, and it had some real trouble. They ended up with both boilers out for a period of 60 days, about 6 months before we bought it. So most of the 50% that was left were extremely high quality residents that we desperately wanted to keep anyway. But most people want a hot shower if they actually pay their bills and don't cause trouble. So, there was some additional clean out to be done, but we knew we were going to have to do just pretty much a full renovation on almost all the units there. And so we were going to need 300,000 square feet of flooring, and we had decided to use the vinyl plank because of the Kool-Aid lesson that we learned on property number one. And so we were actually very fortunate to have a new investor, a husband and wife, join us on that second project. And she is actually a Chinese national. So they actually went with us over to China to go source some vendors. And so we were able to source the flooring. That was probably the biggest savings for us to get all of that vinyl plank flooring. We also, we had a not great experience on our first attempt at doorknobs. They were pretty horrible, and probably threw away most of that $4,000. Had some great luck with getting some tile that really kind of let us take our finishes a little bit more high end at no additional cost, or even a lower cost than what we could source things that were very basic here, and kind of have added to the line over time. So as we've done more and more projects, we've figured out more things that we wanted to do, and so now we do have pretty much a full A to Z renovation materials business that supplies our properties and also a lot of other properties. So one of the really unique things is now that we've kind of really developed out the product line, we do kits for each unit. So for our properties and for our customers, we have walked through the property, and so we know exactly what it is that you need to renovate that unit. We know how many ceiling fans are in it, how many cabinet pulls, how many light switch plate covers, all of these sorts of things, so that we're able to provide one single box with everything that's necessary to do the unit renovation. So it saves a ton of time, saves a lot of loss, a lot of going back and forth to the shop, because there's, sometimes you'll end up with guys in maintenance or rehab that would like to just walk back and forth to the shop all day. So really helps prevent a lot of that. So that provides a lot of extra efficiency, both for our properties and for our other customers that use the unit kits. So that way a manager can just say, oh, I had an A2 move out, and we know exactly what that is and can deliver one box to handle everything that they need. So.
And then do you install all that as well, or you just provide the materials?
We have a construction team in-house that does all the installation on our properties.
Okay.
For the most part, we don't do that for other people at this point. Periodically, we've made exceptions to that. Once in a while, if we've got capacity, we'll do some some turns or other things, that might be something that we explore or enhance at some point in time. But for the most part, the actual installation pieces, other than like a granite or flooring, is really just on our sites at this point.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. And then do you do anything on the exterior CapEx?
We don't do it internally typically on the exterior CapEx, other than perhaps replacing building lights and those sorts of things. We do use contractors. On the exteriors, it's a very, very competitive space. And so we've actually had good luck getting good terms from those. And we have some good partners that we've worked with for now a long time that do an outstanding job on the exteriors. The interiors is the piece that every time that we have tried to outsource it to a third party, we usually end up bringing it back in-house. So, you know, I guess as an example, on that second property, we had a contractor in there, and, you know, they were telling us they were going to get X number of units done per week and all of these things. And finally, we ended up about 8 weeks into it. They had started 38 units. They hadn't finished any of them really. And despite having given them particular specs on paint that we wanted used and other things that we wanted done, there was not a single 5-gallon bucket of paint that matched any other 5-gallon bucket of paint. So we basically had to repaint everything because you could never find the right bucket. They were buying it from a cheaper supplier. You could never find the right bucket that actually matched the walls to touch up anything that was minor. So that's kind of when we started building the crew. At that time, it was sort of a 1099 crew, but then after a couple of years, we brought everything completely in-house. So now all of our renovation crew is direct W-2 employees that have benefits and have vacation time and all that kind of thing. And so that's actually brought us a really, really loyal crew. So I think that's been very key to the success in keeping the costs down and stuff as well.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. And then, so you mentioned property management, materials. Is there any other business lines that you have?
We also have graphics. So one of our graphic designers had tried going out on his own and decided that he didn't really like running the business. And so he asked about coming to work with us. And so we've now really expanded that. So we have a whole signage and graphics, both to do the design, but we have CNC machines that can, and huge printers and things like that. So we're able to print all the signs, do a decent amount of the fabrication in-house. We've got embroidery machines now and lasers that can help with the signage piece, but also can do things like write your name on a Yeti if that's
okay, very cool.
You want to go do, obviously, you know, business cards, property flyers, all of those pieces as well.
Okay, so pretty much any of the marketing, advertising type things.
That we do for a lot of other properties. That's been a good way to kind of get our foot in the door with a lot of properties, because that signage business is one that's a little more problematic, and sometimes people can't find exactly what it is that they're looking for. So we've been able to fill that space both for ourselves and for others as well.
And they work on the design of the item as well, design the signs and everything. Soup to nuts. Awesome. Great. And so, you know, just tell us how that all fits together and how that, you know, provides a competitive advantage to you all when you're acquiring assets, when you're operating them.
Sure.
Kind of touch on a little bit.
Basically, I mean, everything just kind of fits and flows together. So we're actually working on some software development right now that'll further enhance our ability to have everything flow together. But just having control over the entire process. We know where the materials are coming from. We know what they're going to cost. We're, you know, ahead of the game in terms of even when tariffs and things hit, at least we know what that's going to be. And we can control it as much as possible with our interior crew. You know, as long as we operate efficiently, we are able, we have a lot of cost savings for the properties, because when we operate efficiently, it costs a lot less to do these renovations. So that definitely is a competitive advantage as well in terms of when we're buying a property, because we don't have to pay ourselves or we don't charge ourselves the markup. And so that actually goes back into the investors' pockets in terms of the overall property returns, because we're able to get our materials basically at cost, and we get our labor at cost rather than having it marked up by a third party.
And so, you know, on the property management side, I've had the pleasure of visiting some of your properties, whether for, you know, touring the ones that have been on sale or touring them because they're comps or so forth, the properties that we've been looking at. So maybe just walk us through, and, you know, all of them have been very, very well managed, and, you know, so credits to you. So, you know, maybe walk us through kind of what you implement on your properties that may make them differentiated from some of the other properties on the street.
I have an outstanding team. Natasha, my director of operations, is certainly a really key piece of that secret sauce. Um, but really, we try to just remember that these residents, we are working in their homes. And so that's, I think, a really big piece of it. So especially during times like COVID, but even in other times, we have a lot of nonprofits that we work with. So if somebody had lost a job or had a problem, done all those sorts of things, we try to really work with the residents to provide them the connections that they need, make sure that they have the information that they need in order to go get help when help is needed. So I think that's a huge piece of it, really kind of paying attention to the residents and remembering that this is their home and that they need to be here and that that's kind of where it all starts from. And also just, I mean, our team's been just absolutely fantastic. I mean, through this whole crisis, but also just in general. They really take care of each other. I think we've really promoted a company culture of very cooperative behavior. So if one property is falling behind on work orders or just gets slammed, we have a whole lot of the teams from other sites that are willing to go and work on it. Or if we've got some sort of a opening in the portfolio and something's not filled, we've had numerous times where managers have stepped up and gone over there. We've had assistant managers go help collect. We've had people go do leasing challenges at other sites that might need help. So it's really been an awesome family atmosphere to see everybody cooperate and really help one another out instead of only being out for their own particular interest.
No, that's fantastic. And so maybe walk us through how you created that winning culture and that team culture.
I guess, I don't know. Now it's been a bit more formalized and, all the core values and other such things. But I think really that just kind of was the foundation of the whole thing. That's how I look at it. So as a leader, that's what I always set out to create. I'm not particularly competitive by nature, but I care very much that I do well in whatever it is that I decide to do. And so I think I've been able to, I've attracted other team members that feel similarly about that, which I think is really good. And then by that, those team members that are at higher level have then attracted the next round of team members that also feel that sort of way. It's been, I've always tried to take care of the people. It's very important. So, this year we were looking at potentially a really large health insurance increase. We managed to finally get it down to about 9%. But I decided that particularly in this environment, we just ate the cost at our level and kept the premiums for the team members the same. So we try to do things like that. We try to really listen to our teams about what they want to do. I know the team's having a rough time right now because they're used to having events kind of every quarter that we all get together and do fun stuff and whatever else. So I know that they're really missing each other during this time, but we've tried to do some different competitions and text in things and Zoom calls and different stuff to try to keep everybody as connected as possible. That's also really helped on the resident side as well. We've had some creative, beverage on your balcony, so social distancing, happy hour kind of things from the property balconies. We've had, I think we had Pictionary over Zoom on one of them. We did a cooking class. We had one of our, Natasha's husband, Tim, actually works as our construction coordinator, and he is a trained chef. And so he did a cooking class.
That's great.
With like 100 Zoom participants
I saw that chicken Parmesan.
To make the chicken Parmesan. So I didn't get to see it the day it was live. I was like, guys, I told you I wanted to participate in that. And they didn't ever actually let me know when it was happening. So, but I've gotten to see it since. So it's just, I really think that that's kind of the thing is just rather than promoting something, everybody being competitive against one another, I really have always just looked at it as if we all work together and we all do our part, then we can really thrive and do great things. And so I think that's gotten the right team put together, and we all kind of really support one another in that way.
That's fantastic. And so, going back to kind of COVID-19, people have been in their homes for 3 months or so. So, what have you been up to personally over the past 3 months, and how have you improved yourself and your business?
Well, I think we found some interesting other metrics to kind of look at just in terms of really watching cash collections much tighter than we normally would. I mean, obviously we always watch delinquency very closely, but on a more performance month to month, where are we cash wise and looking at the cash positioning of things. So, I mean, that's definitely picked up a bit. I've read some great books, which has been really cool. I've just finished The Obstacle is the Way. We ended our road trip. So my husband and my kids and I went on a road trip actually with some other friends. Anyway, complicated story, but one way or the other, we went on a road trip since all of our international travel had been canceled. We got in the car and went and stayed at a couple of VRBOs and at least kind of got the boys out a little bit. My boys are 13 years old and they have autism. And so one of them, the morning that he woke up for spring break on Monday, he's like, American Airlines Airport. I'm like, yeah, we're not going to really be able to go anywhere right now.
He was looking forward to flying.
It was nice to finally at least get them out of the house for a little bit, go see some cool stuff. So they've now been to 6 national parks on this trip. Amazing. So that was a lot of fun.
That's great.
A good way to just kind of connect and unplug his family time, do some cool stuff. I got a little minor injury as far as just bruises basically from doing the aerial ropes course at one of the ski my kids and that sort of thing. I was kind of wishing that we hadn't done the second round, but it was a lot of fun. It was some good exercise for mom to try to keep up with.
Nice. Them. That's great. That's awesome. And what daily routines or tools do you use that have been helpful for you personally and professionally?
I mean, I guess my life has not been particularly routine since all of this started, just kind of juggling stuff with the boys, figuring out homeschool, what to do about that, going back and forth, time in the office, time at home, different things. So I don't know that there's been a whole lot of routine as much as I'd like to be. I've started to institute a little bit more of it now that we're kind of back from the trip and things are starting to shake out into a little bit more of a normal, but really just taking time to catch up with the team each day if I'm in the office, or just touch base with a couple of them over the phone if not. Has definitely kind of kept us all connected and grow in the same direction, even when we aren't all in the same space at one time. So that's been crucial.
That's great. The trips sound amazing. So, people are going through a tough time during this pandemic, and both investors that may be worried, and other owners, operators that may be paying a lot more close attention to things than they used to. What advice do you have for people that are going through these circumstances?
I think the biggest thing is definitely, as far as residents, it's making sure that they're communicative with us, because we desperately want to help residents to whatever extent that we can. So that's been the biggest thing, is just trying. Sometimes people will, if they lost a job or whatever, they're really nervous to reach out to their landlord at first. And it's like, no, if you let us know that there's a problem, then we could try to help fix it and at least know what's going on. If if you're running into trouble, just communicate with us. And so I think that's been a really big thing. Trying to keep the teams kind of focused together has been really helpful. And for investors, I know that it's a very nerve-wracking time. I mean, it's a nerve-wracking time for all of us. I certainly sleep better at night when everything's smooth and easy than some other times. Because, ultimately, one of the big things that I would tell any syndicator is you have to really understand what it is that you're doing. So I understand very, very clearly that every single night, in addition to my family's financial future, I'm also at least partly responsible for 400 some odd investors and almost 200 employees. And so that's 600 other families to worry about too, and make sure that I'm making good decisions for all of those. And that is not an easy thing to do. It's got to be something that you can manage to have the stomach for, and that you have to always keep top of mind too, to make sure that you really are doing that which is the greatest good for everyone. Because when everybody succeeds, I mean, that's when the greatest success comes.
That's wonderful. If we turn to your acquisition strategy, maybe just walk us through what type of assets that you focus on. It sounds like you've, buying something that's 50% occupied with no boilers, maybe just kind of what things you're looking for in today's market, and whether that's changed from, prior to 2020 and going forward.
Sure. I mean, in today's market, I mean, obviously we're going to be very, very careful about any acquisitions. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, just in terms of exactly what's going to happen with COVID, what's going to happen with elections, how financing and other things might turn out over the next several months. But that said, we are still looking at opportunities when they come up. I mean, it is a time that when everyone else is fearful can sometimes bring a great opportunity. And so we're being extremely cautious in terms of what we're looking at and looking for at the moment, but would move on something if we really found something that was truly a fantastic deal, where we felt that it was a secure, good place for investors to put their money and make money from it. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. I mean, historically, all of our properties are value add. That really don't foresee that changing at any point in time in the near future. What we own primarily right now is mostly 80s vintage properties. couple a little bit older. We've looked at some things that are newer. And so, you know, a lot of it's just going to depend on exactly where the opportunities are, where we think we can make the biggest difference, and what we can provide both through operations and through renovation.
And then if you could just touch a little bit more on the value add component, how deep of a value add do you look for?
It really can be anything. I've had experiences where the exterior was basically completely done. All we did was resurface a tennis court into a soccer tot lot and then just did the interior turns. And that was a fantastic project.
Mm.
We've done some others where, you know, like I said, the second one was 50% occupied. So that was a major project.
Sure.
We've just finished one of the properties that we own currently is 656 units, but it had one phase of it that had been 100% down for at least 15 years that we're aware of.
Wow.
We think maybe longer. So that has been a massive, massive undertaking. You know, very happy to finally have all of those units done and online and everything else. Those things are never quite as smooth as you hope they will be,
Sure.
but we kind of knew that to expect that going in as well. I mean, what you hope and what you expect are kind of two different things sometimes when it comes to the more major value adds. But the cool thing that we really learned through that project is when you have a blank canvas, to think big about it, because most of those units were very small 1-bedrooms, tiny little galley kitchens. You know, one side of the kitchen was basically a stove and a refrigerator, and that was pretty much it. Almost no counter space. So because they were all kind of blank canvases, because there was so much copper that was going to have to be replaced anyway, because we were going to have to shift things around, we really took it as an opportunity to redesign them. And so my husband Matt actually, on a flight to Singapore, designed totally new floor plans for all of those units to restructure the kitchen. So now all of them have L-shaped island kitchens that make the unit feel tons bigger than what it actually is. And so that's been a really huge selling feature. So that you know, it's kind of a neat little pocket right in Dallas that has all new stuff, all new cabinets, all new countertops, all new everything, from the walls out for the most part. So
in terms of, you know, location and submarkets, it looks like, at least from your website, that most of the portfolio is DFW focused. Is there a rhyme and reason to that? And maybe you can just talk about what you think about other opportunities outside of DFW.
Sure. Everything we have right now is in DFW. That's everything that we have had in the past has been in DFW. We've been exploring other markets for several years. And just really have been fortunate enough to find things when we had capital available to acquire stuff that was here locally. Mm-hmm. So it is nice to just have something here and local. Do definitely like the economics of the DFW area, just all the extra job growth and everything else. But there are quite a few other markets that we have been digging into for the past couple of years and kind of watching, and haven't found the right thing to pull the trigger on yet. But I'm sure that'll be coming in the not too distant future. Any
favorite submarkets in DFW?
Grapevine, though. I've never owned there. But a lot of the Tarrant County stuff's been doing really, really well lately. So that's been really interesting. Tarrant County historically has been a lot tougher as far as property tax assessment.
Sure.
But you know, that it has been easier to work with in terms of some other stuff. We've gotten really good traffic. We're getting some good rent bumps there. And there's a lot of good submarkets. I mean, there's a handful that I'd stay away from in DFW, but for the most part, there's been a lot of opportunity kind of throughout DFW over the past 9 years.
May I just ask, what submarkets would you shy away from?
I probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah, okay. And then in terms of deal screening criteria, you know, you probably see tons of deals. So how do you move things from the pile of, you know, dead on arrival to, hey, let's spend more time?
I guess fortunately we've owned so much in so many different areas of DFW. We've got a pretty good pulse on the market and kind of knowing what we can do in different areas. We know oftentimes we have a property nearby that we already know kind of what the rents are going to look like for that submarket. And so that helps us judge through them pretty quickly, usually just kind of with a whisper price per door, knowing kind of where it is, looking a little bit at your unit mix. We can get a pretty decent idea of whether it's even worth kind of building a spreadsheet. We've also really kind of revised our spreadsheet and analysis tools so that we have kind of like a step one that's a really quick and easy process, and then a whole lot of steps that follow afterwards, kind of as things meet the hurdles, so that we don't spend hours and hours and hours analyzing something that was probably DOA. So.
And in terms of your target hold periods and returns, maybe just speak to that.
We're looking primarily at like 3 to 5 year holds, as far as either, so far historically we've sold everything, but we may refi and hold some properties longer term, even in our current portfolio, or as we see things that make sense to do that with. So about 3 to 5 years for some sort of a either cash out refi or sale is our primary target. As far as returns, we are very, very capital gain focused. So a lot of it is really based on what we think we can get the property to, much more so than what the current cash flow is.
Okay.
Obviously, that means I have to be very conservative in terms of exit caps and those sorts of things. I don't think I've ever approved a spreadsheet that had anything below a 6 exit cap. So
okay.
Even in some of the best submarkets. So I give a lot of cushion there that helps a lot. But by pushing the rents, improving operations, we've been able to really make a difference on that. But a lot of the focus really is on that. Our historic returns are fantastic, but that's kind of true for a lot of groups. It's been a good economy, so it hasn't been all that challenging to hit those things, but we're still looking to exceed 20% IRRs wherever possible.
And so it'd just naturally be a lower cash on cash, but more of a, like you said, a capital gains.
Right. It will be.
And then what's your
cash and really kind of that's sort of by design. I'm probably more conservative than some as far as cash that I hang on to. So a lot of the time it's not even so much that the properties aren't cash flowing from the beginning, but until we get to a place where we're really kind of done with all of the major renovation checks, everything's gone along pretty well. The trend has been established. I like to kind of hang on to any extra capital that we're getting from cash flows, and then we can start distributing once we know that kind of everything is done, that there isn't anything unforeseen. We've had plenty of occasions where everything that you walk with the city is just totally fine during due diligence, and then suddenly they walk up and they're like, I want that whole retaining wall replaced. Like, yeah, wow. That's a lot of money. They're like, yeah, I still want it done. So anyway.
And then you had mentioned, just some of the uncertainty in the market. What's your outlook for DFW over the next 6 to 12 months, particularly in the B and C space?
I don't know. My crystal ball broke a while ago, so I'm really not entirely sure what the rest of this year will look like. It seems like there's a couple of things that might be showing some signs of distress, but I think most things kind of aren't. So I think some stuff is still trading. Some stuff, I think there's a bigger gap between buyers and sellers. So I think the next 6 to 12 months is just going to be a walk carefully, watch your step kind of a thing in terms of both acquiring anything or selling anything. So we'll see kind of how that all transpires. We did have some stuff on the market earlier in the year, so we'll see kind of how everything shakes out at the end of the day. But so I guess that's really, I'm not entirely sure on 6 months. Once we start to get into next year, I think things will start to stabilize. I think we'll have a much clearer picture of where things are. And overall, at least long term, I'm really pretty bullish on DFW. The job growth is still just fantastic here. And so that makes a huge difference. And then beyond that, I think people really have learned during this time that multifamily housing is an essential business, whereas retail and office and things like that, I think, are going to get hit much harder. So while I certainly wouldn't underwrite for any additional cap rate compression, and still, like I said, I'm very conservative in exit caps, I think there is a possibility that we will see some cap rate compression as we continue to see money flow out of the coast, more into Texas, more into the Sun Belt, and those sorts of areas. And then also as we see some people that were perhaps previously investing primarily in retail and office see that this might be a safer bet long term.
No, that's great. So, as you look at, underwriting deals, I mean, what rent growth are you modeling, and, exit caps, maybe you could touch upon, you said you don't go below a 6, but have those increased given this market, or do you just feel like,
It's very sub-market driven as far as kind of where I underwrite the exit caps. Like I said, it really hasn't been anything below a 6, and those have been in some pretty good sub-markets, but it varies considerably from that. As far as rent growth, primarily when we're looking at a property, we're sort of looking at it from rather than building a spreadsheet that, well, as long as you increase income by 3% every year and only increase expenses by 2% every year, everything is magical as long as you drag it out across enough columns. And so a lot of what we sort of do is we look at really what can we do right now? How far under market are the rents right now? What could we get for a renovated unit right now? More so than trying to project into the future what rent growth looks like. Some of that just kind of gives us extra padding and upside. So we sort of look at kind of what the top of the market is right now that we could get to feasibly for that property class and in that submarket, and then say, okay, well, if we had a magic wand and we could be 60% renovated right now, then does that hit our metric? And so that's a lot of kind of how we evaluate properties.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And then I guess in terms of asset management, maybe just walk us through some of the KPIs that you focus on. I mean, you have 180 employees, 400 some odd $1 million of assets. So how do you manage everything and quickly and efficiently?
Very, very carefully. We have a big team. So there's a lot of individual people that are monitoring different metrics of things. Obviously, our accounting department's doing a really good job of monitoring cash flows, current income, how things are trending, all of that. Our asset management department is really looking at a lot of kind of where are we performing to where we were trying to get to, what percentage of renovations have been completed and done. So, there's a pretty large number of kind of overall metrics. And that is one of the big things that we're trying to create in the software that we're building, is to have continually better at a glance, how are things going? Hey, wait a minute, look over here. So, a lot of it's just a really fantastic team that really monitor. They each kind of have their own pieces that are getting monitored, and they know who to alert and how to maneuver things if any of those things are getting out of line. I mean, so, I'm obviously, there's the basic occupancy, there's, delinquency, but it's also kind of our lease flow. And that's been one of the biggest surprises during COVID, is I think we actually have done a great job of leasing during this time. I know one of the things that our on-site teams always kind of hated was the call blast and, doing the follow-up with the residents. But as a decent number of them were working from home for a good chunk of the past couple of months, that was the way that they had to prove that they were actually working. And so that was kind of by number of phone calls, number of contacts, number of whatever. And all of a sudden they looked at Natasha one day and they were like, so this is why you try to make us do this all the time, because it actually works? And she's like, that's why I wanted you to do that. So really just the follow-up's been so key in terms of leasing.
Oh, that's awesome. And then in terms of, you mentioned your property management, I guess, software that you're building, is that for property management?
It's not for property management. It's primarily for some asset management indicators to automate some of our more manual processes and really track more closely, better automate, I guess, our current tracking as far as renovated units and make readies and all of those sorts of things. So really kind of the workflow processes. It's not replacing our property management software in any way, but just kind of enhancing it, pulling off of that so that we have better and better places to look. That's one of the big things is like sort of, hey, if across the whole portfolio, a unit hits these metrics, let me know to go look and see whether or not we should increase rent. Those sorts of things.
Okay. No, that's great. And then in terms of, from your experience, it sounds like, you're very focused on, the tenant experience coming to your property. So what makes a tenant choose, let's say, your community versus another community, or another community versus a different community? What are they looking for when they rent?
So at least at this point in time, residents have been really, really focused on the unit itself and the customer service that they're receiving. So when they feel like they are working with somebody that actually cares about what their needs are, oftentimes there are people that, we've gotten a lot of resident referrals, but also sometimes it's even just come up. So what happens if I do lose my job? And so we've been able to explain, we have this entire list of nonprofits that we're able to work with and refer you to for assistance and different things. And this is kind of how we treat our residents. Then, also really the interior of the unit has become hugely important. There's a lot of people that are now working from home, either temporarily or potentially forever. And so they care a lot more about what that home space looks like. We've had, as people have been kind of at home more, there's more times when, the 30-year-old is having their parents come over to the apartment, whereas they'd always gone to their parents' house before. So that really has been the difference, I think. I think having the renovated units has really made a big difference. It's one of the things that we are doing quite differently from most of the people that I've talked to in the industry at the moment. Most people kind of stopped renovations when all of this occurred because we had it in-house, because we had the materials in-house, because we have the labor that otherwise would be sitting around doing nothing. We've continued our renovation program. And so I think that's been something that'll be really helpful to us in the longer term, because people really are looking for the renovated units and nicer places to live as much as possible. I've definitely also seen a lot of people looking for additional space. So the 2 bedrooms have been a very hot commodity of late.
That's great. And then in terms of, let's say a syndicator, owner operator, I should say owner, thinking about, should I self-manage or should I hire a third-party property management? How would you help them frame that decision?
No one's ever going to pay attention or care about it as the way that you do, as long as you do. I guess is the, property management is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of complicated stuff that goes into it. There's great days and awesome stories, and there's some really, really tough days. So, obviously, we self-manage. I wouldn't have any other way. I would not want to entrust this much in assets and this many other people's money to somebody else's decisions. One of the things that's really key to me about property management in-house is if we have one employee that is not doing their job appropriately, we can counsel or deal with one employee, as opposed to waiting until the entire property management company relationship has deteriorated, and then you're trying to find somebody else and get them ramped up and potentially switch softwares in the middle of all of it. So, I think there's a lot of safety that comes from that. But again, it is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot that goes on. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. And so you have to be prepared for that going into it, or there'll be some real challenges on that side as well.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. So as we wrap up, just move into some more personal questions. What advice do you have for people getting into the business, both passives and first-time syndicators?
Pay a lot of attention to who you're working with. That would probably be the biggest thing. As far as passives, make sure that your philosophies are really well aligned with the philosophies of whoever you're going to invest with, both in terms of, how you want to treat people, what things are important to you, and also just in terms of what your particular investment goals are. I remember very, very early on, we were raising money for a property at the same time that another group was. And somebody, they were good friends of ours, so somebody came up and was saying, well, I'm just not sure if I want to invest with you or with them. And I said, well, you need to really go think about what it is that you're trying to achieve from this, because ours is a very value play. We're focused on the capital gain. There's going to be a lot less cash flow, but you're going to get a big pop at the end. Whereas they're focused very much more on a longer term hold, yield play for cash flow, not nearly the same, probably back end upside. So you really need to decide whether you want an apple or an orange, and then decide if you're buying the right apple or right orange. But to make sure that that makes sense, because we've even had people before that it's we have to kind of really work with our investors, because we've had even family and friends referrals that it's still important, even though they know our track record, they know our history, they know that their friends have been happy with us. If there's somebody that's just looking for the cash flow, that we might not be the best fit. So we try to really work with any new investors to our list too, to really find out what their goals are and how to best do that, because we want to make sure everybody's on the same page from the beginning. And I guess for new syndicators, be very careful in this market. There is a learning curve in all of this. And so make sure that you've budgeted appropriate for a learning curve. So that's important. And then the biggest thing is just to remember that this is a people business. Your investors are people, the residents are people, all of the people that are working on your property are people. And so really keeping all of the people top of mind in terms of what it is. The decisions that you're making are impacting other people's financial futures, be it their paychecks, whether or not they have a nice place to live, what investor returns you're able to do later on. So just make sure that you take it seriously. It is a great way to make some money, but it's a lot of work too. And you need to be prepared for the work that it takes, and keep in mind that your decisions have a big impact on a lot of other people.
Well, that's great advice. And then your three biggest lessons learned from your time in multifamily.
Three biggest lessons learned. I think one of them would always be that, you know, whatever you think a major renovation thing is, however long you think it's going to take longer. So to remember that, and even when you know it, sometimes it still catches you a little off guard. On those 200 down units, we'd gotten one building fully approved and was on the way to lease up and everything else. We got the next building, we were about to get the final electrical tag, and the city inspector said, well, you can't have the electrical panels in the closet in new construction. I said, it's not new construction, it's built in the 70s. Well, I don't know. So, I mean, so there was, you know, so we had to kind of pause everything because we weren't sure exactly where it was going to shake out. We knew where it should shake out, but we kind of had to take, you know, so that was like a 2-month setback where everybody was just kind of had to find out, you know, other projects to work on because we couldn't really push it forward, not knowing whether or not that was going to be a new criteria for the rest of the building. So, so anyway, it always just takes a little bit longer than you think it will. So that's probably one of the big things. The other thing is that just, I mean, how you treat the people is so important. How you treat your teams is really important. How you treat the residents. So that's been, I don't know that it was really something that was so much a lessons learned, but sure, it is something that I think has really contributed to our success a lot. As far as the third one, transactions are always a little messy and a little sticky, and they're never quite done till they're done. So that's just an important one to remember. We had a property a while ago, well, quite 4 years ago, I guess now. But it was originally about to go under contract. We'd selected a buyer, everything else, then couldn't quite come to final terms on certain things in the contract and had to go remarket it. And so be patient with it, because it all comes through in the end. But sometimes it's not the fastest or smoothest thing when you're dealing with transactions in multiple millions of dollars. And it's amazing how reasonable and unreasonable different people can be in dealing with all of these different pieces. There's definitely been some times that you never would have thought that you'd get, you know, hung up on 0.1% of something for 2 weeks of discussion on a contract, but sometimes that happens. So
sure. No, that's great advice. So tell us about the Martha's Ranch Foundation and what inspired you to start that.
Sure. So like I mentioned before, I have twin 13-year-old boys with autism. And so I have been very, very fortunate through this business to be able to provide financially so that I don't have to worry too much about what their long-term future is going to look like, covering current camps and therapies and other things, trying more experimental stuff. I've been able to do all of that, and I feel incredibly blessed through this business to have been able to do that. And so we want to really try to focus something on the parents and making the parents' lives a little bit easier through providing some security, but also just providing a fun place where parents and families can go and enjoy one another. I mean, there's a lot of things that my kids love to do and places that they love to go, but it's kind of exhausting sometimes to take them because it requires just much more immediate attention and interaction from adult supervision perspective than most families would experience. And so we're really just trying to make that less of a burden on other families and provide some cool places for families to connect, some respite opportunities so parents can get some breaks, some funding for, you know, more cutting edge treatments to see what would help. My kids have been hugely benefited by some dietary changes that were more complicated things. And so just really kind of finding a way to share all of that knowledge and some of the financial support to really provide parents a better experience as they go down a difficult road.
That's great. So how can people learn more about you, get in touch with you, and learn more about Martha's Ranch?
Sure. Our website is exponentialpropertygroup.com, and so feel free to go there. Also, existmultifamily.com is the materials import and graphics signage side of the world, and so that's a place where you can go to get more information and reach out to them as far as new projects that you might need materials for, new signage and branding projects. And then also marthasranch.org is the site of the nonprofit. There's not a whole lot there yet because this is still pretty new, but we are rapidly developing stuff and content to put up there and much more soon to come.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. There was a lot of good tidbits of information that I was writing down, so really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners will love watching and listening to this episode. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Multifamily Rockstars. We hope this episode was helpful for your personal and professional growth. For more episodes and to learn more about investing in multifamily apartments, check out lifechangingcapital.com.